On the Cut. Reflections on life, work and trade on some of the main canals of England in earlier years of the century. If you look at newspapers from the 1920s and 1930s, you'll find that reports on canals were mostly confined to tragedies, accidents and misdemeanours. You can get a much better idea of the working lives of canal people by looking at canal photographs from the period. They often show boats in their working aspects, at their moorings as well as on the move, and boatmen collected them and treasured them.
This one here, it seemed a coincidence really, because both them here boats are named after girls. This is the Margaret and that was the Kathleen. And these, how I got them two photos, we was in the lock at Longbuckby, and a man come there with a camera and he said, "Here, boatman," he said, "Could I take the pictures?" He said, "Of your boat?" So I said, "Yes." I said, "Providing I get a couple," to him. And I said, "Where'd you come from?" He said, "London." I said, "Oh." Anyway, he took them two photos and he sent them to me. That's how I got them, and I think they're two good ones, aren't they? If you've been up to Buckby, you wouldn't. That house is not there anymore.
I couldn't recognise the background.
No. That was in the background, but that was a little farther from the lock, you see, because we'd gone out the lock. Here's the lock.
When you had a regular run like that, as you did in that carrying period, would you always choose to stop in the same place for your overnights?
No, and stop anywhere when you got a motor. You just pull on the side if you felt tired. If you thought you wanted to get from A to B, you just pull on, and when you got tired, you pull on the side, catch it and tie them on the side there. And if you were empty, especially, you could get to bed.
Did the pubs, the fact that there were pubs along the route, give you stopping places?
Oh yes, I did, but especially when you had horses, you see, because you got to stable them. Nearly all of them kept stables for boat horses. One place where we used to go, where that was a Stretton on the Foss. If the canal company stables was full, which they was down on the Towing Bar side, you sort of go over the bridge to the public, and let's see, I believe his name was Gamble. No, Bragg. His name was Bragg. You got to ask him if before you put your horses in his stable, and get permission off him. And he'd turn round and say, "Is it a heavy-legged one?" What do you want to know if it was a heavy-legged one for? They stamp at night. You know, the heavy-legged ones. Well, you get one as ordinary carbon or something like that. Just very they had it. So you say, "Oh, we only got a pony or something like that." All right, put it in then.
But you weren't welcome if you got a heavy-legged horse.
You weren't welcome if you got a heavy-legged horse.
From a picture of working practice with narrowboats and horses in the south, we move quickly to one of broad boats and horses in the north.
You can go down Wigan Locks faster with oars than a motor or a steam packet. When you're trying to go with a steamer and a propeller, the lock's narrow and it's holding it, so you can't pull it full on. You have to run it just gradually like that, and it'll go easier out. But it were faster with oars.
How well did the horses get to know the difficult bits?
Well, you used to know where it were deep water, and you used to push them. Tell them to be up in them. Now, when it was shallow, you'd hang a feet of corn on them and let the horse take its time, because that boat went as fast. You see, that boat were coming up with top water, and that's how they used to work it.
Could a horse eat on the move?
I did, but you had a muzzle. If you didn't put that muzzle on him, we were picking grass all the time we were going, and you were losing time, you see. You didn't hang a lot of corn on it, about half a tin, because you haven't got a full nose tin. It makes what they call snutter if you get it up in nose. All it goes, and it would throw tin, and you lose your tin and food, and you'd have to go back looking for your nose tin. So they used to put it half full, and they couldn't lose it, you see. And that's how they used to work it.
Those two conversations arose from old canal photographs, one in Leighton Buzzard on the Grand Union Canal and the other in Skipton on the Leeds and Liverpool. And they gave me an idea. What about meeting a boatman on the towpath and asking him to tell me how he'd work his way through a lock? Well, a Cheshire boatman in his 80s agreed to give it a try. We met on the towpath of the Trent and Mersey Canal near to his home. We stood by Bridge 151. Bridge 151 is in fact a double bridge on the downside of a pair of locks. We faced the twin bridges and the twin locks, and then I asked the boatman how he'd set about taking his boat up one of those locks.
If this lock was empty, we should come in this one. But if that one was empty, we shouldn't draw this lock off, we should go in that one.
Well, we haven't got the boat with us, and we haven't got the horse with us,
No.
but you tell me what you'd be thinking if this lock here, the near side one, was full and you'd arrived with the horse. What would happen?
Well, if this one was full, I'll stop the horse here and throw the line out and let the boat go in. Saying if the canal was a bit low, you'd just take your line across and put it on the boat again, and then start the horse going.
How would you set about emptying this lock with the boat coming towards the lock? Because I was thinking that when the water comes down there, it would start pushing your boat backwards, wouldn't it?
Oh, well, it would, yeah. But if your boat goes up to the gate, you could draw the paddle up and the water would hold her up.
Let us go under the bridge then. What's the horse doing in the meantime? Where would the horse be?
The horse would be stood there.
Would have gone up on its own?
Yes, the other side of the bridge. Oh, I no bother with him.
Over the cobbles here?
All right. Over the cobbles.
Yes.
Go to the top of the bank, and he stopped there.
Well, we're coming sharply up by the locks now, and I
Yeah,
suppose
that's
this
right.
one's, what, about 10 feet, this lock, so we're coming up 10 or 12 feet or so.
Oh, yeah, easy.
What are these marks that I see on the brickwork here?
Oh, well, the line used to show. That's what we used to do sometimes. We'd let the horse go, and on that bridge there, if the boat was going in that lock, the line would be showing through here. See? Or sometimes, if you was going down with a load on, you'd also keep going through the bridge till you shouted, whoa.
So that's through pulling there.
And
The
that's-
cotton lines are worn away at the brick.
Yeah.
Was that useful to you, or was it a nuisance?
Oh, no, it wasn't a nuisance.
Okay, let's go up the whole way of the lock now. We've changed
Right.
over from being on cobbles. We're now on sort of a brick footing, aren't we?
Yeah, well then, see, if you come in this lock here, you draw them paddle, the centres there, then we shut these gates.
I've never heard of centre paddles. Explain those to me again.
Well, see, there's two. Both paddles, as he's worked, they work all these four gates, shut them all.
So they're extra paddles, as well as the paddles that control the sluices on the
Yeah,
gate. They're
yeah.
extra paddles that control the gates in terms
Two.
of closing them.
That's right, instead of you pulling them.
Is it the force of the water that closes the gate?
Oh,
Is
yeah,
that the idea?
yeah.
So you didn't have to pull these gates at all?
Oh, no. That one there, that bottom centre I told you about, well, if you drawed that and you was in this lock, this gate would go to first. And then as the lock was coming up, that one would bang to.
When you had worked your lock, you'd got the top gate, the single gate there, to pull open.
Well, sometimes it did go open on its own if you started your horse going. See?
So you'd have to hitch up the horse on the far side there.
Yeah.
How important was the steering into a lock like this?
Oh, you've got to be careful how you're steering it. Because if you've got a boat like this wasn't very strong, or anything like that, well, you'd knock it about so much scandalous, because you'd hit that side first and then come across to this side and hit this side, see?
So a good boatman or a good steerer would be very careful about getting into the lock.
Well, I never saw many bad boatmen, because they could come up and down these locks in dark and not touch the side, you know.
How did you manage in the dark?
Well, we never had to bother, like. We had to keep going.
You hadn't got electric on the boats to light up the canal.
No. And most times, same as around here, or anywhere there, if you got same as these houses here, they got lights on. Sometimes you was wishing lights was out, because there's none at the next lock, see?
Since we have just mentioned lighting, what kind of lighting would you use on board?
You used to have a bulk lamp fastened on front of the boat. Now, you didn't see many boat people with a bulk lamp on at all. they always left it to the light of the night. It was better for the eyes because you was drawing these paddles and that one, and you'd got to get over here and go across here. Well, the light were going down with the boat, see? So you could have misjudged your step. That's why we never had it on at all. But that it was too bad.
One thing we can hear just over on the far lock there, because this is a pair of locks.
That's right, yeah.
One thing we can hear is water escaping. And I suppose if you were pulling in here and there were water cascading at the far end of the lock, you're facing a bit of a waterfall. How did you get round that? Because that could fill up the front end of your boat.
No, it wouldn't.
How did you avoid it?
Oh, the covers did that, see? The cloths on the boat did it. Held it out, see? It had run on the deck, but it had always run off.
Did you get a lot of lock leaking from the side, getting at the
some
boat
on
that
them,
way?
some on them was bad, like. But not many.
Even if you're familiar with today's lock operations, it's likely that the idea of the extra centre paddles is a new one to you. The ones we were talking about there are no longer in place, but I was shown where they used to be. Well, from Cheshire to Warwickshire next, and a Midlands boatman recalling the doubtful pleasures of day boating in winter.
We used to start about 3 o'clock in the morning. That was harness the horse up, walking round the street to the canal. The other chap would pull the boat round to him, and we'd start off. And then we used to go through 3 locks at Minworth, and then about 3/4 of a ride then was to Curdworth Top Lock. There's 11 locks there, and it used to take us 2 hours down the locks. That was winter as well, the same, winter time as well.
So how did you cope when the conditions were against you like that?
Well, you just had to do it. It was just hard work.
But what about the sure-footedness of it? Because you've mentioned lots of locks.
Oh, yes, yeah. We used to have horses in the canal. They used to fall in. Used to get them out. And it was slippy. It was cold.
You're talking about the canal there in the middle of Birmingham, or near to the middle of Birmingham.
Well, that was coming out of Birmingham then. You'd be getting in the countryside then, up to Pooley Hall.
What job would you be on when you would be making these early morning moves?
Fetching coal, nuts, baker's nuts. One would steer the boat and the other would drive the horse. And then there used to be a long stretch. That's when you had your breakfast, and the horse went on his own then.
Who would be in charge in that instance where one was steering and one was tending to the horse?
Well, depending on who he was working with, the one who was in charge was one with the horse. He's the one who, you got to look after the horse, you know what he's got to do and everything like that.
Bulk loads were a very different proposition from carrying foodstuffs, which usually had to be moved with a minimum of delay.
We had a flyboat before we had 2 boats, you see, and we had to do a trip and a half a week. We had 2 nights a week out. My mother and father, and I was a girl then, you see. But we got to do so much work. We fetched the food to the shops. And we fetched all the stuff from Press and Brook and took it to all the shops in the potteries. And bacon, hams, flour, sugar, tin stuff, everything.
But if you're carrying so many different things, wasn't it difficult to keep the hold
Oh, yes,
decent and
you
clean?
had to know how to put it. Because you might have a load of 20 ton, and it might be a bit for Burslem, a bit for Stoke, and a bit for different ones, you see. But you had to put them in certain places of the boat, you see what I mean? To find them when you got there, the first one, you see. But you know how to put it. And then that was when we had a fly boat. We'd only got the 1 boat then. I tell you, we had the 2 boats after that.
You mentioned the flyboat, and the flyboats were meant to go a little bit quicker.
Oh, yes,
Did
yes.
they really do that?
Oh, they have to do. We had to do. My father had a flyboat for 7 years.
It often comes as a surprise to people who are only familiar with a short stretch of city or town canal to discover that the network still extends over 2,000 miles. Here, a Loughborough man refers to a handful of his many destinations on the canal before going on to talk about some of the routines of his cargo-carrying days.
We worked all over Nottingham, Leicester, Coventry, Derby, Long Eaton, London, Stourport, Ellesmere Port, Runcorn, Manchester, Prestonbrook.
If you were carrying, say, 20 tons of material, did you have to have that checked every so often?
No, we had got it checked at Ellesmere Port. They gave us a ticket at Ellesmere Port, and that carries on to Chester. We had that ticket signed at Chester, and then again at Audley Junction. And then it was checked again at the bottom of Wolverhampton Locks. And then when you got to the top of one, I should get a decoration there for the Birmingham, and you get your boat gauge there, what you got on. You'll be gauged again at a place called Bloomfield, Tippen, and then again at Spon Lane, and then Windsor Green, and there also you were finished there.
With all of those checks, though, that must have taken quite a bit of time. How long would a check take?
About 3 minutes, that's all. We used to just run in the stop place, and they'd put a gauge, you stick down inside the boat, gauge you, and you just walk round, again the mast beam each side, and again the cabin each side. That's all they did, and then you sign your ticket, and off you went. So if you loaded 20 ton at Ellesmere, that's so they know you got 20 ton when you got to Birmingham, you see.
The freight office on the Staffs and Worcester Canal at Stewpony was the workplace of the next speaker.
It was attached to the house, the canal house at Stewpony. As the boats came down with the coal, they brought their tickets, and I had to record them in a book and send it every day to Wolverhampton office. All the tonnage and what went through.
A boatman would be coming up or down the canal, and he'd have to call into the office then?
Yes, but before he came in, he would read the ticket out if he could, because I'd got to get it ready that I didn't hold him up, because time was money to them. But have it written out, and when he came, it should be all ready for him to carry on.
What kind of information would be on that ticket? I mean, we're saying the word ticket, but
Yes.
give me some idea of what that really means.
Where they came from, and how much they'd got on the boat, and where it was going to from the colliery. Sometimes I'd look to see if they'd got the right amount on, because on the side of the boats there were plates, red and white, and the water level should be in the middle of those plates. Because a lot of them used to throw it in the canal to lighten the load to get along better. And then when you went to gauge it, they'd had a little trick. They'd stand on the side of the boat, see, tip it this way that it would be level.
So there were ways of getting round
yes.
the written information.
Yes.
In terms of general tonnage or carriage, what sort of weights are we talking about?
20 ton on the motorboat and 26 on the botty boat.
Was it a canal where there was a fair amount of hustle, even in those days, to get through?
Oh, yes, there were quite a lot of boats, more or less non-stop. And if they were held up, they'd go on through the night, because the boatmen were paid by the boat trips.
A former boatman from Stourport showed me a copy of an old boat gauging document. That's a document which shows exactly what a boat can carry. He'd kept it from the 12th of September, 1945, and he could recall clearly the occasion on which it had been handed to his father.
The boats, when they was repaired, if they had a lot of new woodwork, or a course of a brand new boat, had to be weighed by the Birmingham Canal Navigations, and the gauging point was Tipton. They start off with ton weights, and if I remember right, there were sort of half-ton weights towards the end, and usually a day boat would carry about 28 ton with 10 inches of dry side. Although looking at this one here, it just say 12 inches dry side, but generally it was about 10, 11 inches dry side with 28 ton. But you see, the idea of the chart was, in all toll offices around the Birmingham Canal Navigations, there was usually a toll clerk with a gauging stick. And the stick would be put on the side of the boat, the gunwales of the boat, and then he would record the actual dry inches of the side of the boat. He would go into the office and look through the books to see on how much weight you'd got on the boat by this chart.
And that had to relate to your boat with that number?
That's right.
Everyone separately gauged?
That's right, yes.
Interesting too, if we take one particular example, let's take 14 tons. If you were carrying 14 tons, then there ought to be 26.5 0.19 inches, 1900ths of an inch. You're in a decimal system.
That's right. Looking back, I can't quite understand why that was.
But it's there, isn't it?
It is there.
Inches and decimals.
Although we're metric today, yes.
Just by the junction of the Trent and Mersey Canal and the Calden Canal near to Stoke, there is a lock-like structure which many passers-by take to be a dry dock. Certainly that's the way it seemed to me. Along its edges stand small hoisting cranes, which a local boatman explained to me in some detail, informing me at the same time that it wasn't a dry dock, it was an index dock.
Well, on the side of that index dock there, you've got pieces of iron with a hole in the centre and one bar across. And the company's man used to have to put the equality of 20 tons into your boat by these metal weights. And as the water was that there, he'd be setting his 6 little copper plates up. You get an exact gauging. And any boss or any firm that wasn't happy, as you probably hadn't got your right tonnage on there, could always make you go there, get it done, which was free of charge, but you must have a certificate, an index certificate of what date of when your boat was last indexed. Then you're happy, you're indexed right. Any boss hadn't got to worry then as he was being cheated or anything like that, because then you'd always got that one doubt which any firm or any boss, which we've had it done on us many, many times, but in all fairness, and nothing you can do about it, a firm will weigh you out when you get there. They'll go to a lot of trouble sometimes. They might have you weighed out in horse and carts. They might have you weighed out by every barrelful. But in the end, they were satisfied. We're satisfied.
Well, that's the business of accurate indexing and gauging on which the commercial operation of boats had to depend. An old boatman that I talked to at Braunston told me that on most occasions gauging was such a keen matter that, to use his words, the owners would know it if we chucked as little as a shovelful over the side. With gauging and indexing went the constant business of loading and unloading, and that meant that there was always work for a spare pair of hands.
I worked with my mother. My sister worked with my dad, you see. We had 2 horses. And I had to do the same work on that boat as my father did. To work your own locks and everything. And then we used to come back to Preston sometimes to load different stuff. We had boxes, tomatoes, we had everything, all through. So we had these 2 boats and we went to Preston Brook and my dad says, "You'll have to learn to stow, Annie." I said, I'm not. I said, "I'm not learning to stow boats." He said, "Well, you'll have to do." He said, "You're holding us back. We shan't load them both tonight," which he couldn't load both on them together, you see. So he said, "You can get in, you know how to do it." Because I'd watched him, you see, as a girl. So I cried. I said, "I'm not going to do it. No other girl does it, and I'm not doing it." So anyhow, I did. And we was loading flour, catch weights. It was in the war, this was, you see. Catch weights, and we was taking it to Stone to be stowed up. So I got in the boat, and I loaded it myself, and I put 20 ton of flour in the first time, 1 bag at a time. Well, you've got to put your stuff in a boat in a certain way, because it'll tip over. You see what I mean? It tips over. So you've got to know how to do it. If you don't know, you tip boat over.
This week's edition of On the Cut included Jack Wilson, Joe Bridge, Bert Bailey, George Chadwick, Annie Brooks, Jack Meredith, Margaret Wood, Philip Garrett and Len Beardmore. In the next edition, boat people talk about the difficulties and obstacles that they overcame as a matter of course in their journeys on the Cut.